Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Arlington Democrats Morning Mug to talk about the 2020 Capital Improvement Plan for Arlington County. To give you some context of why the Arlington Dems are holding this forum, we are, as a committee, going to consider taking a position on the capital improvement plan and bond issues for our November sample ballot. And we wanted to make sure that our members are educated about what is included in the one-year capital improvement plan and give people an opportunity to ask some questions. Really glad that we have three of our great local elected officials to talk about it. County Board Member Matt Ferranti, County Board Member Takis Karantonis, and School Board Member Barbara Kanninen. So I'm gonna toss it over to Matt Ferranti to kind of tee up what we're talking about for this one-year capital improvement plan.
Thanks, Maggie, and thank you, Barbara and Takis, for joining, as well as the others on the Zoom call. Are probably everyone's 900th Zoom call of the pandemic. We have been learning a whole new way of operating, and that applies also to the capital improvement plan. For background, we've got the annual operating budgets, and then we've got our investments in physical infrastructure and longer term infrastructure. So typically the capital improvement plan, or the CIP, as most of you will know, is a 10-year plan that gets revisited every 2 years. And so it's our way of assessing what do we invest in long term. Because of the economic impacts that have come with the COVID pandemic, the county board and the school board agreed that we would do a shorter capital improvement plan. The process for determining that plan happens between, it happens continuously, but it really focuses at the board levels in January or February through May or June. And so right when we were about to be in the heart of this is when everything had to shut down for COVID-19. So we are doing this year a one-year capital improvement plan, which essentially just focuses on the essential things that we, as a community, we felt we had to do. And I think that makes sense because it's also the case that it's difficult to assess bonds in an economically uncertain time. And as we get more clarity and as we start to recover and have more certainty, the capital improvement plan next year will have a longer time frame, but not the full 10-year time frame. It will be in the 4 to 6 years range. And I should kind of mention that as we do a capital improvement plan, the projects get more clearly down to specific numbers defined every year. So the things that we do for the next 2 years are very clearly defined, and the estimates for 8 to 10 years from now for projects are good estimates, but they're not quite as precisely done. So that's the context. We are planning this year for the things that must happen. And there's some bridges that got washed away that we're working on, and Takis will talk a little bit more about that. But big picture, we're still planning for the long term, but we're doing so with recognition that this is a economically uncertain time where we needed to focus. And so a big piece of it is our schools. Of what we ended up this year with in bonds is our schools, because our schools are so central to really the heart of Arlington in so many ways. So I'll send it over to you, Barbara, for some thoughts on the schools portion of the capital improvement plan.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Matt. So yes, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what is in the school bond that you're going to be voting on in November. And Matt already set this up by letting you know that unlike in normal times, we're really just asking to sell bonds for projects that we're going to do in the next year. Let me back up and give you a little context about our schools. I hope that you're familiar with some of this already. The schools have been growing in Arlington. And The simple sort of stylized statistic that I generally share is that about 10 years ago, we had 18,000 students in Arlington public schools. Today, we have about 28,000 students. So we have grown, our schools have grown about 10,000 students in the last 10 years. That's about a 40% growth rate in our student population. It's interesting because I know people have been sharing the statistics from the county profile about how many apartments and townhomes and things like that we have in Arlington, but, and I can't explain exactly why the student growth has been so high, but that 10,000 students translates to approximately a 40% growth rate in our student enrollment, while the county overall has grown 9% in the last 10 years. So the bottom line is the school system that we had in place has not been enough. And especially in the last 5 or 6 years that I've been on the board, we have been building to catch up to that. So just a quick summary, we're about to build our 3rd new elementary school that's going to open next year. We have a new middle school that we just opened up. And we've also been doing high school expansions, including our largest expansion is that white building next to the planetarium and next to Washington Liberty High School. That is being, that's where the school board used to meet. That used to be school office space. And that's actually going to be high school classroom space opening up in about 2 years. So we have been building and building, and on top of just plain bricks and mortar, we've been expanding our instructional opportunities, right? Because everything's changing, our economy's changing, the opportunities we want to provide to our students is changing. So we've got this sort of whole portfolio of things we're doing. But that leads us to today and this, this one-year plan. I have to tell you personally that based on what I just told you about our rather accelerated growth of building, I was, before COVID, optimistic about this next plan and how we were really just catching up to our growth rate. We had more to do, but we had really done a lot, and we were kind of going to be on that glide path of continuing to build, but a little more comfortably than we had been doing. And it was looking really good. And then, of course, as Matt described, you know, we now have this completely different economy. We're not comfortable knowing our revenue stream and knowing what kind of debt we can take on and knowing our, you know, what we can do in that 10-year time horizon. So we're now focused, like Matt described, on what we have to do now, with the idea that we're going to continue to talk and plan and move toward this spring when we develop sort of a 4 to 6 year time horizon that we'll have a little more. So given all that, I'm just going to tell you what we have in this bond, again, that you'll be voting on. And the biggest piece, the school bond is almost $53 million. And if you've been following us, you know that's a small amount for a school bond on the ballot. It's about $53 million. The biggest part of it is planning money. About $32 million of that is planning money for new schools. And normally for a 10-year time horizon, we would have kind of defined some schools and had that whole funding plan to actually build schools. But in this 1-year time horizon, we're talking about that preliminary step of planning, but we need money to do that. We have community processes, we have architects, you know, we have a number of things that we do to get ready to actually build. So a large part of this funding is to plan how we're going to meet those continued seat needs that we have. The next biggest piece is something we have in every school bond, which is simply called infrastructure projects. So we have almost 40 school buildings, 25 elementary schools, 6 middle schools, et cetera. And they're of all different ages. And every year we need roofs, we need new windows, you know, just a variety of HVAC is a big one as well, a variety of maintenance projects to keep all those schools functioning well. And so, and we do this continually every year. It's an ongoing effort. And so in this bond, we have 15 million slated for just those maintenance projects. It's listed as major infrastructure projects. The other thing is we need to provide seats, but of course every seat needs to be high quality. And we're taking advantage of some activities that we have with boundary changes and moving programs around to go into some of our buildings and just plain refresh and modernize their kitchens and cafeterias. Food and providing for our students is, fundamentally important as they show up in our schools when we get back to showing up in our schools. So in this bond, we're going to have 3 elementary schools that will then have some overall refreshes. The ATS building on George Mason, the Key Elementary building, and that's going to become a new neighborhood school next year, and also the McKinley building. So those are going to be, that's about $7 million. And then finally, the last, 2 more things. We're going to renovate some entrances to buildings. We've, over the last many years, been creating more secure entrances in our school buildings. Sign of the times, we don't want people to just be able to wander into our doors and wander through the halls of our schools. We have check-in processes and more security at our schools. We have a handful of schools that we haven't gotten to do that yet, where we build sort of a more formal entrance so that everyone is kind of steered toward the front office when they walk in. So we have a set of schools that will have those entrance renovations, and that's $5 million. And then finally, part of our plan, though not part of this bond referendum, but I want to share anyway, we're going to use reserve funds. So it's still part of our capital plan. We're going to use reserve funds to modernize our transportation facility. This is just another thing. As we've grown, we have more buses, we have more bus drivers. They have, a place that they gather where they have their breaks and lunch and shower and things like that. And we just have more of them. And we have an old facility at the Trade Center, and we're going to be modernizing that. That's something that it's about $4 million. We're going to use our own reserve funds for that project. So that's a lot. And again, a big part of our conversation this coming year is to develop those plans and really start defining what we're going to be doing in terms of building new schools. So thank you, Matt, and thank you, Maggie, for helping us organize. And I think maybe I'm just going to turn it directly over to Takis to talk about the county side.
So, hi everybody, good morning. So we have 2 big pieces in the county side. This in the metro. It's one is the stormwater management and stormwater investments. The other is about other infrastructure pieces. So community infrastructures, local parks and recreation, metro and transportation. So I wanted to talk about these a little bit more in detail. Let me just put my notes. So it's about $30 million for metro and transportation improvements. These are capital improvements that we have to do in order to maintain our metro. Metro is the lifeline of our economy in Arlington. This is a very important piece of the investment that we have to keep up doing. Right now, it's a very good time to accelerate metro capital improvements. I think that Arlington pays about 1/3 of Metro's budget every year, so it is in our interest to do that. And I'm ready to answer questions on details on that. Then we have about $3.6 million for local parks and recreation investments. As you remember, we had significant damages from the July 8th, 2019 storm. Several bridges were damaged there, pedestrian bridges. I remember that was Labaran, Grand Carlin, Gulf Branch, all over. And then we are also investing in the Roslyn Highland Park, and there is also money for trails and paving. So this is about $4 million, and then it's $7.4 million in community infrastructure. which is fire station innovations. There are capital improvements in the courthouse complex. Everything that we actually need right now urgently to have a functioning, even a better functioning government. We have seen that now in COVID-19, the improvement in infrastructure, in digital infrastructure, in the way to deliver e-government services, and all this. What binds all this together is that this is really the short-term needs, and for 1 year. I don't know if I don't remember if Matt or Barbara have mentioned that, but we are looking into the next year also into a more short-term CIP. So not the 10-year outlook or 10-year horizon, but a 4 to 6 year CIP. So in measuring, seeing how the COVID-19 crisis will impact our economy and impact also county finances, we will adapt our priorities to our spending priorities in capital projects as we go. Now, what you will recognize in the bond referenda of this year is that really significant, essential economic infrastructure with metro transportation, paving, and investment in local parks, in the basics, the basic repairs in local parks and recreation has a very high priority. And then we invest what we need to invest right now to keep our community infrastructure intact and functional and delivering for everybody. And then, of course, addressing at least a part of our stormwater challenges, about which Matt will be talking in more in detail. I think that with that, I'm opening that, and I'm ready to answer and welcoming questions on details of these.
Sure. So I know you mentioned just the stormwater piece, and I did, Takis, and I did want to just touch on that before we go right to questions. We've got a good small group, so a discussion seems really helpful. But just on stormwater, I think it's important for folks to know that we made a significant investment in stormwater actually in the 1970s in the southern part of the county, and that is the 4 Mile Run the 4 Mile Run sort of watershed, because there was a hurricane that dumped a ton of water in the southern part of the county. So this 50 million is an investment in the entire county. There are some parts of the county in the south, east, west, and north that need investments, and so that's what we did. This is partially a response to the July 8th storm of last year. It's also based on, in this 1960s and 70s and 50s as well, the best thinking, or the only thinking that really occurred by local governments, was that streams should be undergrounded so that they wouldn't cause, there wouldn't be flooding. Of course, now with climate change, but also there's just too much water that comes out of storms. So we are having to adjust our way of thinking about flood protection and flood resilience, really. So I know that there have been reasonable questions mentioned about the equity of investing in neighborhoods. It really should be noted, there are a number of affordable units in different parts of the county. In Westover, and for example, there are affordable units there that were victims of some flooding. So this is an investment in the entire county. It is a significant investment, and the county board supported it. If you've been in some of the homes of individuals who had their homes really impacted by the storms of last year, they are well aware that they have to make investments in their own flood resilience, but there's a basic level of infrastructure that we felt should be provided to keep our whole community growing. So that's on stormwater, and let's go to questions, or Maggie, unless we've missed anything in particular.
I think you guys provided a really good overview. So since we do have a small group, I'd open it up to questions. So if anyone has a question.
Maggie, I also wanted to add one thing. What is in the bond referendum doesn't fund the entire 1 year CIP. There are more stuff, right? So just that that we are clear. The bonds are what is, from a financial point of view, long-term financing point of view, appropriate to bond, to borrow at this point.
Thank you, Takis. Yeah. So if there are any questions, folks on the call, feel free to raise your kind of Zoom hand. But one thing, just to kind of kick it off, we're talking about bond referenda, and that automatically brings up kind of the county's general fiscal health. And I'm not sure if anyone wants to weigh in on how taking on the one-term bond referenda might impact the overall kind of bond ratings of the county. Like, would this negatively impact the long-term fiscal health of the county?
I think that's I'll take a crack at it, and certainly fill in if you have thoughts, Barbara and Takis, but that's it's an important question to ask. But because this is a scaled down CIP, there's less, that's part of the thinking here. There's inherently less, there's not really, Arlington is positioned, I think there are perhaps 3,000 counties or thereabouts in the United States. And there's, I think it's well less than, it's a very small fraction, less than 1% have the AAA bond rating that we have, because we have we have been very fiscally smart, making investments, but also not overextending ourselves. And so there's an informal rule that we wouldn't we wouldn't have bonds outstanding that are greater in any 1 year than 10% of overall revenues. And we will be well below that this year because we did a scaled back capital improvement plan. Now, on the fiscal health, Arlington is perhaps, we're the, last couple of years, we've been the fifth or sixth highest median income. I think it's median income, yeah, in the county. So we have a lot of resources. We're perhaps better positioned than almost any county in the country to weather the fiscal storm that is as a result of the pandemic. But that does not mean that we are not facing significant fiscal challenges on a yearly operating basis. So as far as it impacts the capital improvement plan, even, we have to make smart investments for the long term, even when the fiscal short-term outlook is difficult. If you don't make those long-term investments, then you won't grow. And I guess it's slightly different, but I did want to mention body-worn cameras are in this, and that's an investment in fairness and safety in our community, and it's one that all of us supported, and so we are making smart investments, and I'm wary because I think I've got a PhD economist and several master's economists, and I don't have a graduate economics degree. So Takis and Barbara, go to it.
Matt, I think you covered everything that we need to. I mean, again, that 10% rule is like a golden rule in Arlington. And, just do the personal analogy. If you're going to take on personal debt, you look at what you expect your income to be over time, and then you think about what you can afford. And that 10% rule, and it is kind of a goal, it is a standard, that the bond rating agencies use when they look at us. But that's exactly how we think about, what we can do in our plans. And it's exactly why we only did a 1 year plan this time, because normally we feel very comfortable looking out at those 10 years and saying, every year we expect our revenues to grow about 2 to 3%. I mean, the county finance office will do those projections. They're always very conservative, so we're always ultimately under that 10%, but we've been comfortable knowing that Arlington is continuing to grow. And that's exactly what just changed. We don't know what that outlook is. We don't feel comfortable building our plan out into the future because we don't know whether revenues will be up or down. I mean, we're concerned they'll be down. But we can do this year because frankly, you know, we kind of, half of this year is already kind of like baked in. And I think we are concerned that we might do worse this year than we originally projected. And we're going to find out soon. And as we find that out, that'll give us a sense of where we're headed. As these guys have mentioned, you know, as we next think about a 4 to 6 year plan. Once we get a little more information, October is a big month because the real estate payments come in, and you know, going from there, as we get more and more information, we'll know what path we're on. But we always stick to that 10%. I mean, that's a very hard and fast rule in Arlington.
Yes, and there is even there's also another. There's a lot of strategic planning that goes into CIP. So despite the fact that you will see now a 1-year CIP or next year 4-year CIP, the community discussion, also the policy discussion is going on. So how we are going to align projects, investments, etc. This is going on. And for example, there was a strategic reason why the Jenny Dean Park was already included in CIP and funded, you know, a little bit before the project was completely, you know, approved and passed through all the hoops of approval, etc. There was a strategic investment in the Shirlington Crescent, and this is going on. This is still happening. Another important, you know, measure of how we are, you know, we're managing our the economic challenges ahead is also the ratio of debt service in our budget. And this is, you know, hovering between 5.5 and 6%. And this is pretty constant, or we intend to keep it constant as good as I can understand our Department of Management Finance guidance. And this is a good thing. That means that we are trying to keep things, you know, expenditures in on a steady, predictable trajectory. Then there is the issue to really distinguish or really focus on the fact that we are funding investments. Matt called them smart investments. I believe they are. So. And there are, you know, keeping in these short-term CIPs, keeping essential projects going. So, for example, the funding that about $25 million that is given to the Columbia Pike multimodal improvements. Imagine if we wouldn't do that. We have been through so many years now of investment there, major upset for neighborhoods because this is, you know, related to ongoing construction, etc. Imagine if we would be throttling down this right now. Not only would it be a tremendous annoyance for the neighborhoods that are around these multimodal improvements, it would also postpone a critical part of revitalizing, a critical precondition of revitalizing Columbia Pike's infrastructure, especially now that's on the west end, which is the most lagging part of the Pike. There are another 10 million that we are investing in through the Smart Streets or Complete Streets program in Crystal City, in Paragon City, in Potomac Yard. This is a boom part of Arlington right now. This is actually after the HQ2 investment. This is where significant private investment will be coming in and still coming in and still on despite COVID. So we are, you know, we are focusing investment where we can really help Arlington economies to recover. This is not just keeping the lights on. This is also positioning Arlington's economy to have the best performance in a recovery scenario.
Helps if I unmute myself. Thank you guys. I think that was a really good background of just how all of the capital improvement bonds fit together and that look forward to post-COVID's economy and what sort of investments we need to make to ensure that we have, still a strong economic base here in Arlington. So there are a few other folks on the call. Does anyone else have questions for our county board and school board members?
Jim Webster. I've got a couple of questions, or one question really. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for doing this. This is really helpful for me because I've just moved back to Arlington in the midst of the pandemic after a 1.5 year absence in Fairfax County. And it's nice to be able to catch up on what is going on. But I've got one specific question about a previously approved capital improvement, the Aquatic Center. I live not far from there, Arlington Ridge, just a few blocks away. Mm-hmm. And it looks like it's about at the same stage as when I left a 1.5 years ago, well, 2 years ago. What's the outlook for finishing that? I have a personal interest in it. My wife is a certified water aerobics instructor. It'd be nice to have her get a job in, a place very close to us.
I'm happy to take a crack at that. And welcome back. I know you didn't move that far even within Fairfax County, Jim. So happy you're back. The construction is ongoing. We did make a decision as far as opening to delay that so that the operating costs that we would face from the Aquatic Center will not be felt this year. This is part of our effort to, we forewent a lot of investments that we wanted to do and increases in salary for public safety, for example. But the construction is ongoing. I know it may look like it's the same as a year or two ago, but there has been, I've driven by it a number of times in the last few months, and there is progress. It's on schedule. All of it has been paid for as far as construction. We were already under contract and well underway. So I think that we're still, the plan is still to finish construction in the coming year, but not open it. And the precise date of finished construction is, I think that it's sort of looking into next spring or summer at this point. But opening it's in an operating and budget environment that is this challenged. We won't be doing that in this fiscal year. So that's this July that just started until next July 1st. We have made the decision not to open because there are a fair amount of operating expenses that would result. And, I think Takis and Maggie touched on sort of the fiscal challenges that we're facing. Property tax revenues have been coming in. Hotel tax revenues and restaurant sales tax revenues are down. And so we think it's important not to keep our biggest resource, which is our talented staff and the work that we are able to do. So that's where the Aquatic Center is as far as opening. I am sorry that I hope you didn't move back only because of that. I hope there are other reasons for sure, but that's where we are on opening the operation of the Aquatic Center.
Yes, it's definitely the capital investment in this is ongoing. The contracts are honored. The building is going on. The operation, when to start with operation and have to absorb the operational costs in our regular budget, this is the question. This is also a question for Labaran Community Center. Um, I believe that in the next budget round, so the round that will be conditioned by the COVID impact, we will have to, think very strategically about how to optimize our operation costs in order to eventually take these facilities, to start operations in these facilities. But definitely, I believe that all my colleagues right now keeping our staff, having the county operating at the optimal level and delivering at the optimal level under the COVID conditions is our first priority, and then right after that will be, looking at opening new centers like Labaran and the aquatic center. I personally am trying to go to think even ahead and challenge the county manager to find other ways, more creative ways to do that. Long conversation, we can have it offline if you want.
Thanks, Takis. So I did get a question through a message of, have there been any major projects that have been paused or postponed as we're looking at this 1-year capital improvement plan and the kind of financial struggles the pandemic has created?
Well, I can jump in on that. There may be others as well, but certainly on the school side, combination of this pandemic budget, but also a fact of just the way things played out, we did have a very large, wonderful plan. And I know, Takis's heart was in it, my heart was in it, Matt's, all of us were really excited about our plans at the Career Center site. If any of you know it, it's the Career Center is where the Columbia Pike Library is. There's also an elementary school on the site. And the Career Center is where our students have career and technical ed courses, which range from everything from those traditional things like cosmetology and culinary to very modern skills like website design and computer programming and cybersecurity. It's where we teach cybersecurity. So it's a tremendous program and a wonderful program. And we've been building opportunities there. You may have heard of Arlington Tech, our newest high school program. And that's kind of like a STEM-based, project-based high school that now has about 300 students, and we're building it up towards 600. We were going to keep expanding and have just sort of a full renovation and expansion of the traditional parts of that school, as well as, just building it out and having it be a very modern, ultra modern high school, right? Are just really state of the art and really doing some great things on that site. It turned out that once we designed the whole thing with community input, it turned out to be far more expensive than we felt we could do, especially in this environment. And so unfortunately, at the moment, that project has been scrapped as it was being, and the school board basically decided that, right? We just could not pursue this project. And so we may be considering other things, more modest endeavors on that site, but that's a very large project that many of our hearts were in. It was going to be, we say, the gem or jewel of the Pike. It was really going to be a vibrant center of Columbia Pike. That's a loss for our community, but we're definitely committed to figuring out what to do instead.
Yeah, I think that we were, the county board, Takis and Barbara, there's so many conversations about the investments we wanted to make in the schools because of the capacity, the growth and enrollment. So, but there's, to your question, there's a lot. I mean, Takis and I both named two that have not been scrapped, but it is a significant change to not open Lover Run and not open the Aquatic Center. And that is an example of fiscally smart thinking in a very challenging time. But there's there's a couple of bridges that we were able to do that were washed out in the July 8th flood, but there's one that we had to wait on in the Lover Run area. There's the neighborhood conservation program that we did not invest in, which is a number of sort of infrastructure to serve streets, and we did make significant investments this year, but we held off on a lot. And that's just sort of three big examples, or four big examples. There's a number of other items that we just didn't even think we could appropriately get to that are long-term we've been wanting to do. There's a road that is along in South Arlington that would provide access along the Army Navy golf club that would help a little bit. So that's another example which we held off. To be honest, the thinking was so bare bones, what do we think we should do, that we did not focus as much on building an extensive list of what we did not do this year. So I think it's fiscally smart thinking and restraint and responsibility to take the approach we had. I don't know if, Takis, any other projects immediately come to mind, but when that was proposed, that some of that conversation was before you joined. You actually joined the board. So
yes. Yeah, there are. So, for example, right now we just funded the initial parts of their parts in transportation improvements. There are significant bigger, allocations in the previous 10-year CIP, 2019 to 2028. That again, as I said before. We kept the vector of these investments going, but we really postponed larger investments. This is also painful sometimes because, as you know, especially in street improvements, like for example, or transportation system improvements, there is a lot of gain if you can front load a little bit your investment. Investment is such a thing that you cannot always distribute it evenly over a timeline. Most of the times, actually, it makes a financial and fiscal sense to front load some of the costs. So, for example, if we wanted to have signal priority on major bus corridors so that buses flow faster than normal vehicular traffic, or we wanted to advance funding for off-vehicle fare collection, which would make boarding buses faster, etc. We would like to have that now and reap the benefits of that as we go in the future. Same for major, street lighting projects and bridge improvements or metro access improvements. So right now we have, I sense that the CIP, this one-year CIP, has funded the strategically necessary minimum, but the general economic frame of this year has denied us the possibility, to front load some investment and reap benefits later. So as we go and as we assess with precision what the impact of COVID will be on Arlington's economy, we will get back to this, more strategic economic investment thinking. And again, as I said before, there were certain things that are really critical for many neighborhoods that were positioned in a way that they're continued, like the Jenny Dean Park.
I think Heather was asking.
Yes, Heather, we have a question from Heather.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for doing this, first of all. I think that it's very smart to take a look at this and break it down into smaller chunks, as we're all kind of had a surprising year and everybody kind of needs to give pause and refocus and get a good strategy together. So I appreciate this happening. While everything's kind of happened, specifically maybe more towards schools, but also within the county. We've had to really take a look at moving budgets or doing different things to be able to, I hate to use this word, but pivot for technology or the safety of the buildings, whether it's the entranceways, but specifically maybe HVAC systems or that sort of thing, or even safety in our communities and neighborhoods. Do you plan on having any sort of contingency planning for this, or possibly doing in the future, again, one-year CIPs as we come out of this? So we're dealing with what we have in front of us right now, but we're going to be it's going to have a longer rollout, I think, than anybody's going to expect. And during all of this, a lot of very generous community members have given a lot of support to each other, whether it's for food or for job support or any of those things. So I'm just wondering if there's a plan to enrich community support programs, specifically with the health department, as potential vaccines may come out or things like that. Has that been addressed at all, as far as what we can do to support community programs and putting a little bit of cash there? Because our community has been so generous in helping to take care of each other, but at some point we're going to really need to get some sort of more support from the county as well.
Well, I mean, I feel as though both Takis and I would probably love to jump in on that one. I'll just say that, so I buy a neighbor lunch, buy a neighbor school supplies, the outpouring of support for the free clinic, Arlington Thrive. The community has done so much, and there's a, help with rent in some of the PTAs. The work on hunger by the PTAs has been phenomenal. I think it is also the case that the county we have been focusing on, we have provided over 1,400 families with help with their rent to prevent them from being evicted, which is both the right thing to do by the county and by the manager and the board. It's also the smart thing to do economically, because it's much more expensive for people to be evicted. The health and human services costs are huge when folks are evicted. So, and that's an investment that so far is over $4 million. We have invested, I think it's the case that we have done a lot of those investments in healthcare through the Department of Human Services and through Dr. Varghese. We've done a lot of those investments have been described in Tuesday county board meetings over the last 6 months. And not everybody hangs on every word of our Tuesday afternoon press releases that we do. So I think there's a story that there is, $4 million through Thrive and millions more for PPE and masks, that we've distributed masks to, I think, about 200 different community-based organizations. And also we're spending quite a bit to have the testing facility to support the testing facility at Arlington Mill, which is where there's a huge need. And if you look at the 22204 cases of COVID, they're higher. So we're trying to focus our resources there. So we have been doing quite a bit. There's on the Department of Health, we have the best contact tracing in the state. That is good, but that is, our goal would be the best in the country, because, and I've heard it personally from people impacted about how the contact tracers that we have invested in have been helpful. So we, as we think about the next year, we have to invest in the greatest needs. And we have talked about healthcare, hunger, housing, and economic recovery. And our small business-based program has also been targeted, I think, way better than the federal PPE program. Your question touches a little bit on, do we need to make additional investments and further focus our budget in an equitable way on healthcare? And I think it's a fair question, but I kind of wanted to give that context that we are making significant investments. And that doesn't mean the community isn't doing amazing things. The grocery cards that teachers helped with, and everything we're doing on hunger are key pieces of it. But we're doing quite a bit. The additional investment in healthcare over the coming year, I agree, this isn't going to be short, so we need to keep thinking about how we can make smart investments in that critical need, keeping people healthy and alive. Takis?
Absolutely. And so there will be definitely lessons to be learned from the current level of response, which I believe it's both the community and your local government is approaching that with real sense of urgency and real sense of delivering for those Arlingtonians who are the most vulnerable right now. A lot needs to be done. A lot has been done, but a lot needs to be done in addition to that. Plus, as you remember, we started the response to COVID with, under the relatively optimistic assumption, we all did that, community and government, that we would see a recovery from the prime impact of lockdown in March within 3, 4, 5 months. We are now facing a longer timeline to that. We don't know when a vaccine will be available. We don't know when a effective medical treatment will be available. So this definitely, as we go, teaches us and more lessons, and also frames the mind of our county manager and of your county board and of the community to create sustainable long-term structures to serve these needs on the longer term that we ever been considering until now. So we are working on this. The initial investment, the $4 million that Matt has referred to, the allocation of the CARES Act money, and also the active lobbying right now with the state and the federal government to the degree possible to make more federal funding and state funding available for the needs of our community, of all local communities in the state, is ongoing. So we are really keeping the eyes on the puck here, and we try to do the best job we can. Now, so the answer in short terms is yes. We will have to increase, improve, reorganize our long-term response to COVID. In addition to that, we still, and this is important to understand, we still don't know with precision what the economic impact of COVID is on Arlington's overall economy. We know that, for example, our airport was severely hit and it's just coming back at a very, very slow rate. We know that our hospitality industry has been severely hit. The unemployment rate in these sectors is staggering. It's very high, and at the tune of 70% or so. And this is not recovering very fast. So we know that, but on the other side, we know also that key industries in Arlington, government industries, the sectors around the Department of Defense, tech companies, etc., are actually doing very well. Some are growing. So the balance of all that is still not visible. We haven't seen the October tax revenue numbers. This will be a first indicator. A little bit later than that, we'll have the business, the B-poll tax, which is a business tax on this is another indicator. And definitely in January, we will have the new assessments for the next year, the assessments of real estate, both commercial and residential. So according to these, then by that time, we'll have an accurate image mapping of where we are and what we will need and how we are, and accordingly we will decide. For right now, we are just making conservative, predictions. We try to be as cautious as possible, but with a firm focus on helping people first.
Thanks, Takis. So we are now at 11 o'clock, and we had a great conversation, and thank you to everyone that got up on a Saturday morning to talk about county bond referenda. I don't know if Barbara, Matt, or Takis, if you have any final thoughts as we go ahead. From the party's perspective, the steering committee is going to consider its vote for a position on the referenda on Wednesday, and then it'll go to the general body vote the first Wednesday of September.
I think it's been a great conversation. I would just say, the last school bond, by the way, always gets slightly higher than the other bonds. They all have in the past, the recent past, passed pretty well, but I think the last one, it was literally an 80% support for the school bond. The Democrats, as far as I know, have supported the school bond and all of the bonds for a long time, and happy to answer any questions you all have if you need clarification, but in advance, really appreciate your considering supporting this on the sample ballot. Thanks.
Well said. Thank you, Barbara. And having started my career as a teacher, I really, our schools are, if you think about whether the American dream is real, schools are right at the center of it. And so that's a huge reason to invest and support the school, the bond as a whole. I think that the other components, we want bridges that help you get across Lover Run, and we want the basics of, we want body-worn cameras is a smart investment. And there are numerous other basic infrastructure pieces that I think are worth supporting. There is also a list of projects that we did not move forward with at the end of the CIP in the appendices on pages 49 and 50, if you got the glory of wanting to read that to the question. And then the healthcare investment and the essential needs investment is a good question, but this bond is part of what we need to continue to invest in Arlington's future. So thank you. Takis.
No, I talked already too much. I just wanted, it was 82%, I believe, the school board referendum approval, which is a very high number. And I think it shows, it gives a lot of insight of how we in Arlington support our public school system, right? And there is an additional reason this year to do that, because the school board, the school system in general is also a conveyor belt of more services for food, for example, and help to families in need. And that's an additional reason to be very supportive of that.
Great. Thank you, Takis. And I think that, thank you everyone, and enjoy your Saturday.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming, you guys. See you soon.